said before a date, Robin would tell the man my medical and sexual history. To be clear, this was before the first date. The whole thing was humiliating, and I knew that the insanity of this system kept me from finding basic companionship, having a fun night out with friends, or making new friends, let alone falling in love. That is ridiculous. That definitely seems designed just to humiliate her and make sure she would never find anyone, because who would submit to that? Britney Spears has been such a public mess. I think she would have, on her own, had a difficult time finding a meaningful relationship, because it might have been a little bit iffy to get into a relationship with her. Is she stable? But now, you've got the dad being like, well, if you want to date my daughter, better sit down, son, because I'm going to ask you some questions. You're going to sign an NDA. You're going to get some blood work done. Am I going to go through Britney's sexual history with you? My gosh. She said, thinking back on the way my father was raised by June and the way I was brought up by him, I had known from the jump that it would be an actual nightmare to have him in charge. The thought of my father taking over any aspect of my life had filled me with fear. But taking over everything? It was just the worst thing that could possibly ever happen in my life, my music, my career, and my sanity. She says that she was miserable day to day, and she was only able to find joy and comfort in the boys and in her routine. Interestingly, she'd started dating Jason Trawick, that guy who was her brother's friend who checked on her that one time when she was in Las Vegas, and Kevin had shown her the door and wouldn't let her come into his recording session. Well, now she's with Jason, and apparently she dated him for like 3 years. But it's very odd that he was even with her. He was 10 years older than her, like I said, but he just seems like a totally opposite person to her. She said he was hypervigilant. She describes what she means by them not being a good fit, but I couldn't quite piece what it was she was saying about it. She says, when we went out together, he was hypervigilant. I knew I could be clueless sometimes. I'm not clueless anymore. Now I'm basically a CIA agent. He was always scoping everything out, obsessively controlling situations. I'd been around the paparazzi so much that I knew what was up. I knew the deal. So to see him in a suit, working at this huge agency, getting in the car with me, I felt like he was almost too aware of who I was. He cared too much about managing things. I was used to photographers swarming me at the streets, and I hardly noticed them anymore, which I suppose isn't really good either. We did have a great relationship. I felt a lot of love for him and from him. Okay, am I the only one who doesn't get what she's talking about in this passage? I was clueless then, but now I'm basically a CIA agent, and my boyfriend was too aware of who I was to see him in a suit working at a huge agency getting in the car with me. I just wasn't sure about his hypervigilance. I'm like, what are you talking about? I think maybe what she means is just that because he wasn't in the industry in the same way that she was, he worked for an agency, he just wasn't used to the paparazzi. But see, now for her to act all cavalier about the paparazzi, it doesn't quite fit with the narrative we've gotten so far that they're the ones who drove her to insanity. Wouldn't she like the fact that this guy's hypervigilant, wanting to protect her from the situation? And she's like, I was used to it. I don't really know what his deal was. But that's the whole point, Britney, that you are in a terrible situation because, as you say, it's from the paparazzi, and then you're dating a guy who wants to take it seriously with and for you. And you're like, he was just kind of like weird how much he couldn't handle it. I don't really get what she's talking about. And that goes for a lot of what we're about to read. She steps away from talking about that relationship to talk about her career and what she was doing for work at the time. She said, even though I was on a break from the Femme Fatale tour, my father second-guessed every little thing I did, including what I ate. It puzzled me that my mom never said anything about it. My parents got back together in 2010, 8 years after their divorce. And I felt so betrayed by the state of California. My mom seemed to love that because of the conservatorship, my dad now had a real job. They watched Criminal Minds on the couch every effing night. Who does that? When my father told me I couldn't have dessert, I felt like it was not just him telling me, but my family and my state. Like I was not allowed legally to eat dessert because he said so. Do you see what I'm saying about the poutiness of this section? Like, I just want us to talk seriously about what it was that they were up to. Like, let's get some more about how are they controlling you. Like, I want more about, you know, the rigmarole she'd have to go through if somebody wanted to date her, or what her day looked like as far as like them giving her medications, or what medications were they putting her on, you know. But to be like, then he wouldn't even let me have dessert or even look at my cell phone, or like, what in the world is my dad and my mom sitting on the couch watching effing Criminal Minds every night? Like, what the heck? Like, well, they're married now, and that's what married people do. You watch TV at the end of the day. If she's upset that her parents got back together, and she feels upset because she feels like it's predicated upon the fact that her conservatorship now gives the dad focus in his life, and so now the mom's attracted to him again, and that is a pretty messed up situation, then say that. Say that's what you're mad about, not that they sat on the couch every night like an old married couple watching true crime. Now, she says that around the same time, she had gotten engaged to Jason. So even though she just finished telling us that it was a weird relationship where he was kind of an oddball, and he was, Mr. Man in a suit, and, she was pretty freewheeling about life, and it wasn't a super great setup. Against all odds, they decided to get engaged at this point. But she says in 2012, not long after he became my co-conservator, my feelings changed. You don't say. So you're basically marrying your dad now. Yeah, I think all of us would feel cooled down on a relationship under those circumstances. She says, I couldn't see it then, but I see now that having him tied up with the organization controlling my life might have played a part in draining the romance out of our relationship. You couldn't see it then. How much medication did they have you on, Britney? That's fairly obvious why you felt grossed out now by the relationship with Jason. She said at that point, she just stopped even sleeping in the bed with him, and she would go and sleep in the bed with her kids. She said, I felt a bond with them, and I just literally closed the door on Jason. Well, why wouldn't you? How could anybody in her life think that this was a good idea? Now, Britney, what you're going to do is you're going to get engaged to Jason. I know he's a little bit nerdy, but, you're going to get, he's stable, and he's going to be good for you and my grandbabies. Britney, part of him getting engaged to you is him taking on that co-conservatorship. I don't want to hear about it. It has to happen. You can't go through this world by yourself, and your daddy and I aren't going to live forever. So Jason's going to have to take over here at some point. And for Britney to be like, well, it's gross now. But why, Britney? Lynn even had the audacity to tell Britney that is so hateful. You'd get out of the bed with that man and go sleep with your babies. That is so hateful. Why are you so mean and ugly all the time, Britney? Why? Why do you have to just be like this? That man is going to take care of you. And for you to just get up and shut the door on him and go and get in the bed with the baby, that's messed up, Britney. How are you going to have a fruitful relationship with this man when you've already chosen your kids over him? Anyway, she said, I'm sorry, I can't help it. I just don't love him anymore. So eventually he breaks up with her, but she could care less. She said he wrote her a long letter and then he just disappeared. He resigned as my co-conservator, says Britney, when our relationship ended. To me, it seemed that he had something of an identity crisis. He put colored streaks in his hair and went to Santa Monica Pier and rode bikes every day with a bunch of tattooed dudes. Yeah, I think she really was saved there. She says, hey, I get it. Now that I'm in my 40s, I'm going through my own identity crisis, and I think it was just time for us to part ways. Oh, the depressing nature of the whole thing continues, though. I mean, it's like, if that isn't depressing enough, you're forced into sort of like this relationship with this guy who's willing to submit to the blood test and the weird conversation about your sexual history. And then, you date him for 3 years. It's not exactly like the best. And then you find out he's your co-conservator after you guys get engaged. And then you're sort of like getting out of the bed with him and going and getting in the bed with your mom, with your kids. And then you get your mom in your ear being like, you are so hateful. And you're just like, oh, whatever. And he breaks up with you and you're like, okay. And then he goes and starts riding bikes down at the Santa Monica Pier with his dyed hair and his tattooed friends. I mean, it's just like, oh, meaninglessness wherever you look.